Welcome back again, friends. Mark Nebo with the Steel City Roundtable podcast. Another great week, another great day, another sober day, and I'm a happy man. Today, I got an amazing guest with me, a gentleman I met probably about a decade ago, and I'm not going to tell you how because it's kind of a cool story. But I want to introduce you, everybody, to Bart Heaney of the Weight We Carry podcast.
What's going on, guys? How are you?
Oh, you got the balloons going, brother.
Look at that.
Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. So I've known Bart for about 10 years. He used to work at a supply company when I was a law enforcement officer. So I bought a lot of stuff from him, returned a lot of stuff to him. Bart, why don't you tell people what you do now and tell them a little bit about your podcast?
So what's up, guys? Again, like Mark said, my name is Bart Heaney. I am a former EMT. I was an EMT for Ross Westview EMS for approximately 12 years. Did that full time. And also worked at that supply company. Like Mark said, I was the lead armorer there for about 6 years. After that, moved on to dispatch. I work within the Pittsburgh area as a dispatcher. I've been doing that for coming up on 6 years. Also with the podcast, we kind of do the same thing as Mark does here, but we focus on the mental health aspect of first responders. So that's what we're doing, man.
That light you got in the background is pretty trippy. I feel like back when I was doing drugs in college.
Sure, right?
Yeah, so I ran across Bart's podcast, just like I do everything. You know, I'm just surfing on the internet, trying to find people to collaborate with, trying to find people that share the message and share the purpose. And I ran across Bart's podcast, and I was like, I have to have this guy on because what he's doing is great work. You know, you've been in the emergency services for a long time now, and you see the same things that I've seen. You see how mental health is it's not taken care of by most of these agencies. They really don't give a shit. Until you put a bullet to your head and pull the trigger, it's not a problem. What's your stance, and how do you feel about the way, the emergency services community is treating mental health these days?
I think, when I came into it, it was around 2008. It was still the whole suck it up buttercup mentality. We still have those old dinosaurs out there that still believe the same thing. It's not your emergency. But I firmly believe now the mental health is coming to the forefront of our careers, whether it's police, fire, EMS, dispatch. We're very lucky to have people in our corner, at least in my management. They are trying to push that through. So I think it starts at the very beginning. Say you go to academy or you go to EMT school, whatever. I think, the Nancy Caroline books that we got it for EMS, I think mental health needs to be right there at the very beginning, and then your continued education through it and needs to be pushed because they don't tell you what you're going to see. I mean, you can imagine what you see until you actually see it and then how it affects you. So you have no understanding of really how to cope with those traumas that you encounter during being on the job.
I always have to remind people, I did 12 years in law enforcement. So, I didn't retire from it, but I did it long enough to see what it can do to a person.
Mm-hmm.
I think I agree with you to an extent that, mental health is coming to the forefront. But I still don't think at this point that departments and agencies are treating PTSD like they're treating, a shooting or a stabbing. And that's a very bold statement to make because they're very different. But
Mm-hmm.
everything that we go through, everything that you go through, everything that someone in emergency services go through leaves a stain, leaves a scar behind. And those scars need to be treated like any other medical issue. And I don't think across the board, I don't think we're there yet. I think it's very agency dependent.
Very true. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I think City of Pittsburgh, for all their failings, and there's a lot of them, they're coming on board. Like I've talked to some of my friends that still work there, and there's a lot more services available now. But I think one of the issues that you run into a lot of times is that the services are provided by people that have no clue what you're going through, as in they do not work in emergency services. So you've got, Joe Schmo, the ragman, sitting there talking from a clinical aspect. He's been treating, kids with PTSD and kids with, ADD. Well, that's good, but it's not the same as treating an adult person who's seen someone blow their head off.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that aspect of it?
And I concur with that. Just like when you had Josh Shimko on, Josh and I had him on my show also. And so with the PTSI bill that passed last October, that is now coming up to be set into place this coming October, with workers' comp stuff and all that, I think that's a step. Like you said, we're taking steps in the right direction. And I think it's people like us and other podcasts, whoever's doing it, need to keep on pushing the bill. It's so important because you see what happens. You're firsthand what happens when you can't take care of that, whether it becomes addiction, uh, anything along those lines. So, but I think the main thing is, like you said, the dependency on department, that's the problem. And I believe on your side of things with the law enforcement, it's even worse because uh I referred it back to a few comments that he made on my show, and he was like, well, you admit that you have PTSD, or if you had problems on certain calls, and then no one wants to work with you, and they won't think that you have their back.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. It's very hard for someone who works in emergency services to come out of the closet, quote unquote, of the post-traumatic stress closet, because then, you're always worried that your partner's going to be concerned whether or not you can perform your duties to the fullest. Well, guess what, folks? I'm here to tell you, you can, but it's a real fucking struggle.
Sure.
It's a real hard day when you have a bad PTSD day where you're sitting there and you're like, you're manic and you're all over the place, your anxiety's through the roof, and then you go to a hot call and you got to get your shit together. Then you add alcoholism or narcotics on top of it, and you're just asking for a total disaster. This guy. Yeah, referring back to Josh Shimko, this is exactly my point. He works for a fairly, not a huge department, but a big enough department in a good enough area where they should be taking this shit seriously. And instead of giving that man the help that he needs and that he came out and asked for, they want to push him out the door, get him to force him to quit and get him to forced retirement. What do you think is the appropriate response from an agency when someone comes to you and goes, listen, I am suffering mentally. I am having a rough time keeping my shit together. I need your help.
Yeah.
What do you think that department should do at that point?
I believe it's the department's responsibility, first and foremost, to take care of their employees. No matter what the cost, because I know that came into play. That was the first thing that department said to him and his family is, who's going to pay for it?
They are.
I was blown. My mind was blown when I heard that. And I was like, what are we doing? You want to maintain a level of safety for your own people, but we're not going to give you the help that you need because we know the type of stuff that you see. Come on now. Like, I believe, if you go to your management and say, man, I'm struggling, I went on this call. So obviously we know CISM teams and CISM, excellent resources, but in-house management and peer support, that needs to be done. They need to be there, and whatever it takes, whatever resources that they need to give their officers or EMTs or whatever they are, they need to provide it.
Okay.
There's
agree.
Grants and everything that can, if they're worried about money for it, there's grants for it. So first and foremost is the employee.
I'm all about throwing people under the bus today. City of Pittsburgh Police Department fails miserably in this. I don't know if you know who Patty Paluca is, but this is going to come out even bigger in my next episode, Wednesday at 7 p.m. with Tony Moreno, candidate for mayor and also retired city police officer, where we talk about this. And they had a CIT program, a program for mental health, where they taught you about all the things you could do. And his wife was spearheading that, and everything she tried to do, she met with resistance from the city. Like, they didn't want to give her the money. They didn't want to give her the resources. She went out and got chairs and, found a place to do things, and they still didn't want to do it. What happens when someone comes to their department and goes, I'm an alcoholic, I need help? What happens for it?
On our side of things, I think it's the IEP program. They'll get the employee assistance program in, but I mean, along my lines of things, I'm not certain what happens.
They help. They help.
Well,
You know,
they
they put you in
actually help.
rehab. They put
Yeah,
you in rehab because they can't have you carrying a gun on the street when you're fucking drunk. You
right.
know, they put you in rehab. They get you therapy. They get you the things you need. Now, granted, do they want to? No. They want you to just go away,
Yeah,
but they have to because the laws tell them they have to. If you come and say, I have a problem, they have to help you. It should be the same thing with mental health. You know, I'm struggling. I have stress. I have post traumatic stress. Help me, please. It shouldn't be, uh,
who's
why
gonna pay
or
for
what do you need or no, it's like,
it?
listen, this is what you do. You call
Yeah,
this person puts you in touch with this person. Next thing you know, you're getting your therapy, you're getting your rehab, you're getting your treatment, and then they just say, hey, come back when you're healthy. You know, that's what's supposed to happen. That's what happened for a trucking company when I
yeah,
went to rehab. They were like, bro, do your thing, come back, follow this plan, and you got a job when you come back. Guys like Josh Shimko who have the balls to stand up and say, hey, I'm the guy that needs help, gets treated like trash.
absolutely.
And I think that's the most disheartening thing is seeing someone like him. And granted, I only know him from our interview, but the guy's a great man. He's a great guy, you know, and
Absolutely.
he's really dealing with it right now. And he really needs the help and support of his department. You
Yeah.
know, what have you seen throughout your time with emergency services when someone like, do you see people coming out and saying, hey man, I need help? I got, you know, PTSD or whatever they're calling it now. You know, I know there's different acronyms,
Sure.
whatever, but to me, it's still PTSD.
I think, open that dialogue, it's definitely opened up more. So when I was still working EMS, it was still sort of taboo to really to talk about it. I believe the past 3, 4 years, it's definitely gotten a little bit better. And I think, people like you and myself providing that platform for people to be like, well, look at these people, they battle with addiction, battle with depression or PTSD, and they're being open about it. It shows people that you can be open about it and actually find that help. I think that stigma is starting to break down. Like you said, it's going to be a uphill battle for it. Um, but honestly, still, when I was still working on the trucks, there wasn't much told. I didn't bring it up. I didn't bring it up. Like I told you before you started push record, I was like, I dealt with serious depression, and then I was diagnosed with PTSD, and then all that crap, and I never wanted to get medicated for it because I thought I'm weak. I felt like I was weak if I went to go get the help, or I needed to go talk to a therapist and figure out what the hell's going on with me. Luckily, I've never been addicted to drugs. I never wanted to hurt myself. I was always just sad or irritated, and those things. Um, but again, man, like I think us providing platforms for people, it's small, but it can build and build. It's that whole ripple effect of what we can do and not stand by idly and not do anything about it.
I
Um,
agree. I agree
so
100%.
I really think I know departments are taking notice of our podcasts. I know a lot of higher ups that are watching mine in particular, and it's making there's changes. There's going to be I can't really say, but there's going to be a presser, and I'm going to be speaking at it with some news folks. So let's hope it gets pushed out even more.
Yeah, I don't know if higher ups are watching mine, and if they are, I hope you're paying attention because, you know, I kept my mouth shut for 12 years like everybody else. I wanted to, you know, I didn't want any stress. I didn't want any retribution. I didn't want to deal with that shit at work. But I think that's one of the things you said there. You know, I keep going back to Josh Shimko because he points out a lot of the problems in the system.
He's a prime example of what is wrong with the system.
His department, when I got out of rehab and I came home, I think I was like 8 or 9 months sober. I contacted his department directly. And if I remember correctly, I spoke to the chief and I said, hey, here's what I'm doing. I'm willing to offer my time, volunteer. I won't say anything bad about law enforcement, at least not then. But I'll come and speak to your guys about undiagnosed PTSD and trauma and depression and how alcohol and these things could really cause a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I never got a phone call back. Josh Shimko happens. And then he said shortly after he went to the department, they hired some therapist or some shit to work within the department. Why did it take? You had someone, and it's not me, it could be anybody, but you had somebody offering free to sit and put their shit on the line for you and try to help your people deal with their shit. And you were like, not important enough to call you back, but we'll hire a therapist proactively after somebody claims that they have issues.
Because they're reactive. That's a lot of it's reactivity. They don't want to prepare, or if that event happens, they don't want to be like, we're already ready for it. Let's go.
Yeah.
So they're going to be reactive to anything. I think that's, the politics of it. That's the politics of it.
I think, I'm sorry, go ahead, continue.
No, go ahead.
I think a big thing is that the departments, if you don't meet their criteria for PTSD, like if it wasn't a shooting or a stabbing or, you ran over someone with your car, it isn't a traumatic event, like an overtly traumatic event like that, they don't think you can have PTSD. Josh went to a call to scoop a dead lady out of a pond, and her arm hit his leg, and he freaked them out, and then that triggered everything else.
Sure.
And they're like, that's not enough. Like, how is that not enough? How can you tell somebody what's enough and what's not enough when it comes to PTSD?
Everyone's experience is different. It is the compiling traumas that we constantly get into as first responders. And it's not, like I said, it's usually not one incident. It's all that stuff built up. And as Josh said, my wife and I use this analogy all the time because it rings so true about PTSD. Think of your mental health and PTSD as a dam. Okay, so that dam holds up. You have the logs sitting into it, the rocks, the heavier weights of the crashing of the water. Slowly after time, it just starts to crack a little bit here and there, here and there. So if you start taking care of those things that are bothering you at the time, you can sort of cement that dam back up. But if you let it build up and more of those logs keep hitting, it's going to eventually break. And then boom, there's that incident that just happens. So you have to maintain your mental health throughout your career, even though if you're like, I'm okay, I'm tough, I can handle it. It's not that way. It doesn't matter. It does not. I've met some of the hardest head and strongest willed people that I thought I've ever met, and they just break.
Yeah, well,
they break.
Hard head, you're talking to one right now.
Yeah, and you break. And it doesn't matter how strong you think you are. We're not meant to see this stuff repeatedly over and over and over again. Not supposed to see it.
I agree.
But we know signing up. Well,
you should know.
Hindsight. We know now that we should have been taking better care of our mental health throughout the career. Yeah, I laugh about it now, but like I said, those traumas. I had several events working on the trucks, and then what really tipped it was the beginning of 2020 when I had a really serious medical scare, and I ended up in the hospital and almost dying. I was in there for 2 months. So it popped off right when I didn't even know what COVID was. So went into the ER. And ended up having, it's a disease called Guillain-Barré syndrome. So I was paralyzed from my chest down. Ended up in the hospital. COVID popped off the next day after I was in for a 24-hour evaluation. My wife came in, and then the following day when she came to visit me to see how everything was, they escorted her out, and that's when they locked down all the hospitals and no one could come into the hospitals.
I mean, did they say it was a COVID-related illness, or
they thought I was patient zero?
Really? Of course.
But the funny thing is, I didn't have COVID. I never had COVID then.
That's crazy, man. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, dude.
Like I said, we haven't seen each other in years, so it's been at least a decade, probably.
Yeah,
since we've talked.
Like I said, 2020 that popped off, and that's what really my mental health. That was I fought for my life, man, by myself. I was in the hospital because my wife, my son, I couldn't see them, couldn't touch them for 2 months. So I'm laid up in the hospital bed, paralyzed, and they started giving me all these medications to try to get, because what it does, it's my nervous system's eating my own nerves and the myelin sheath. It's almost like a acute onset of MS, but it can be recovered.
Okay.
But I was paralyzed from the chest down, and then I was bedridden, so I threw a major PE, pulmonary embolism. So it was when the doctors after the fact, they're like, most people don't live through that one.
How are you
I
doing
remember
now? Or is your health good now?
I have a lot of neurological stuff, my lower legs. I have a lot of neuropathy and the mental health aspect of it really screwed with me. But that's what we continue to do is talk about it and work through those problems. And also, I'd like to give you a little bit more resources. A guy named Dan Jarvis. He is retired military, retired law enforcement. He has worked with a program with UNLV, and him and a partner developed a company called Tactical Resiliency USA .com and Heal the Heroes. And they work with cognitive therapy and neuroplasticity of the brain. I've done a therapy session with him. It is absolutely mind blowing.
Well, why don't you go into what that therapy entails? Because I'm interested now.
So we only did a quick session just because I wanted to get him on the show and I wanted to learn. I'm like, okay, if we're going to get on, I went in with a, you have to go in with a little hesitancy, but I went into it and they ask you questions from the beginning of your childhood all the way up until present day. And you go through the protocols and they ask you, then you score, then they'll go over those scores. And then he called me back about 2 weeks later, and then we sat down over the phone. He travels all throughout the United States going to military installments and everything for PTSD guys. It's amazing. And he talks you through. He's like, okay, Bart, so go back to your childhood and think, what was the very first traumatic experience that you ever had that you can think of? And for me, luckily, I had a very good childhood, good upbringing. You know what I mean? I didn't have any problems at home, but it really started to begin, and once I got into public safety, that's because I was a little bit older when I got in. I was 30 when I got into EMS.
That was 33.
So you understand that,
Yep.
you're like, yeah, okay, we just doing our thing, and then you get pushed into public safety. You're like, whoa, what's this? And your brain's already
lived
developed.
one life, and now you're starting a new one.
That's it, absolutely. And so got into some of the incidences that I went through that a few times almost made me quit EMS altogether. Especially kid calls; they're always horrible. But did that, and then he's like, it's basically like a time warp. So what it's doing is compartmentalizing your brain, so dealing with the trauma and where it needs to stack within, I guess, your medulla or whatever. I'm not a neuroscientist or anything like that, but it's so simple. It's almost like, how's this work? It's so simple, but it works. So we went through the sessions and it bounced you back from that trauma to, then he says, what's the most important and most poignant thing and the most happiest place you've been in your life? I thought about like my wife, my son, and all that shit. Then he's like, all right, so time work back, and he does the swoosh. He's like, swoosh back to that traumatic incident, then sit on it and look at it. You see that whatever trauma you see in front of you, the horrible, horrific looking thing, then you sort of like almost like a drone, you take up above it, and that color starts to fade away from it. And then he's like, all right, swish right back to your happiest moment. He's like, how do you feel? I'm like, feels good to be where I'm at now. He's like, cool. Now go all the way back to your very first trauma. It's just bouncing back and forth. And then he's towards the end, he's like, take all that stuff that we had, we put it in a box. You see that fire over there? You toss it in the fire. Boom, it's gone. I was like, okay.
That sounds very similar to EMDR and ART therapy.
They're very similar to that with the
same foundation of taking that trauma and either reframing it or associating it with something different in order to deal with it.
Correct.
Bring the good of it out and try to forget the bad.
Correct.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But the crazy thing is, he's like, dude, so I'm going to call you tomorrow, sleep on it, and I'm going to see how you're feeling in the morning. So next day, he called me. It was probably around 11. I'm an early riser. Even on my days off, I'm up around like 6:30. And he's like, how you feel today, Bart? And I'm like, bro, like, I was tired as shit. My brain hurt. My head was pounding. I'm like, what is going on? He's like, that's normal. He's like, That's your brain workout. That's the neuroplasticity. That's all your neurons and your synapses reconfiguring and recompartmentalizing that trauma into your brain where it needs to be. It's still there, but it's not going to hit you as it did before. And I'll tell you what, Mark, it actually worked. Like ever since that once, it's only been one session. Like I see the pictures, like I post pictures of, me being in the hospital and I bring up my challenge coins from a really bad pediatric call. And sure, it happened, but it's over. We look where we're at now. So it really, for me, it's helped. And I had a former coworker, his wife approached me and he went and did it. He was in the military, all kinds of crazy stuff happened with him. And he went through a therapy session with Dan. And guess what? Same thing. It's working.
Yeah, there's a lot of great therapies out there that people are unaware of because, unless you ask, and this is one of the sad things, unless you ask about it, like what treatment is there that I can do to help me, they're not going to tell you. They're just going to send you to therapy, whatever therapist, and tell you to go get medicated, do what you got to do, and figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
There's things like neurotherapy. There's, I mentioned it before, ART and EMDR, which are all trauma therapies. The most amazing one that I've ever gone through was neurotherapy, where you had to fill out a questionnaire. It's a bunch of different questions, a bunch of recognition, like number sequences and all this crazy shit to see how you're doing with your cognitive thoughts and how you're doing with critical thinking and being able to apply that to the questions. And then you stare at a wall for I think it was 20 minutes with your eyes open and then 10 minutes or 20 minutes with your eyes closed. And you have this cap on that's reading the brain waves.
Yep.
And then the therapy itself is you lay on a heated bed that's, a vibrating heating bed. They play binaural beats, music frequencies in the background. And then they have these electrodes on your head. And it's like a half hour every day. You do this consistently every day. And after 5 weeks, I went from, it's red, the red, green, yellow, red's bad, green's good. Yellow means you need some work. When I started, almost everything was in yellow and a little bit in red, nothing in green. I was in fight or flight 24/7. I was always worried about what was going to happen. I didn't have any critical thinking. I didn't have logical skills. I didn't enjoy anything. I didn't want to have sex. My whole life was fear. And then when I got done, they were like, you now have the brain of a normal 49-year-old man. And I'm like, what do you mean a normal brain? My brain is so far from normal. But now I didn't have the manic moments. When I thought about something, it didn't hit me the same way. So there's a lot of things out there that people need. And if you want, reach out to Bart, reach out to me. I'll tell you what I know. Unfortunately, I think neurotherapy is not covered by insurance in Pennsylvania. So it's $5,000 for 20 sessions. But let me tell you what, it's the best $5,000 you're ever going to spend because it saved my life.
Invest in yourself, man.
I was suicidal, man.
Yeah.
A couple days before I went to rehab, I had got my loaded 43 ready to go, and something stopped me. And I don't know. This is maybe something you can ask. I mean, I know there's facilities that will do, they call it dual diagnosis, mental health and an addiction. But do you know of any centers that are strictly geared in therapies for PTSD?
Not offhand. I'd have to look. I'm sure I have some resources written down somewhere.
Yeah,
not offhand.
To me, because I'm going to put them up on the at the end of the show so that people can read them. But there's a lot of things that we're talking about that people don't talk about. They're afraid to put their mess on the line for people to see. What facilitated the podcast for you? What was actually the thing that said, you know what, I think I can help people. Let's do this.
So for me, Mark, I've always kind of been that one that people would always come to if they had something going on. You know what I mean? I've always sort of been that calm sort of Buddha. People would call me Buddha and they'd see me like, this dude's he's real chill and everything. But that was me hiding everything, holding my own, suppressing my own stuff. And I always would give really good advice, and then I would never follow my own advice with helping myself. So like I said, once I got on medication for my depression, and like I said, I fought it for so long. I didn't want to be medicated because I thought I was stronger than that. I'm like, that's weak if I'm going to be on medication. I took it the first day, and I felt like a huge weight came off my shoulders. It really did. Like, I haven't felt that clarity for years. Like, I felt a lot more sharp. My cognitive skills were sharper. But like, we were sitting in bed, my wife and I'm like, babe, I want to start a podcast. She's like, oh, here we go again with one of your other crazy hobbies that's going to cost us a bunch of money. Which, hey,
It did.
when I get into something, I do it. You know,
Yeah,
I
I
go
agree. I
full
agree.
balls in. And but I said, babe, like, I want to do a podcast about mental health and first responders. There's a call for it. There's a need for it. And dove head in. We recorded that first episode. I don't know if you saw it. It was so raw, and I didn't know how to use microphones, so echoey. And we poured our heart out. We went through. You know, we were both balling on it, and I said, if we don't do this, no one else is going to come on and do the same thing.
Yeah, I think one of the things we see a lot of times is people will do podcasts about things like this, but then at the end they're trying to sell you something. They're trying to sell their name or
No.
their book or their program. It's I just had a guy on here, Scotty G, Just Be with Scotty G podcast. He's a functional aging specialist. Like, there's so many people out in this podcast space that are doing it for the right reason, and that's to be selfless and to put the best foot forward and to use our faults and
Mhm.
our experiences to help other people. I think, I don't know about you, but when I see somebody like a podcast and then like it's promotions the whole way through, and I just turn it off. I'm like, you really don't care in
Yeah,
my
for
mind.
sure. I mean, I would definitely love to get a little bit of help, because it is like it's all we're putting our heart and soul into it, but we went into it not expecting a penny out of it.
Yeah.
It's just for Riverside and everything. It costs money every month, just and so we started doing T-shirts and stickers, and that's really where we're at. But we're not trying to make money off it.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you could, cool. But it's not going to be like, here, I'm selling you this product. I'm going to sell you this product. It doesn't make sense. You're in it for the wrong reasons. And like I said, if you come in and be selfless and pour your heart into it, people will come.
Yeah.
And I think we already see it. We already see that happen in a big way. In a big way.
Speaking of sponsors, I got to take this break to thank my sponsor. Steel City Roundtable Podcast is sponsored by Steel City Roundtable Podcast. Thank you very much.
Let's go.
Yeah. So, you use that analogy as a dam. I use the analogy of a dumpster. It's the same concept. You keep stacking shit in there until it gets full, and then one day it just overflows, and now you're fucked.
Yep.
And I curse a lot. I apologize for that.
Oh, it's all good, man.
But I mean, I think, and that's the thing, is I think everybody always thinks there's another foot of room. There's always just a little bit more room to stack something. Now, you said you never were suicidal. How did your depression manifest itself? Like, what were your signs?
Oh man, couldn't even it for me, my depression actually physically hurt. Like, I couldn't get out of bed, and my professional career, just I was calling off a lot, and I wasn't sick, you know what I mean? I couldn't do it. I would get so anxious to go in and have to deal with other people's problems along with my own personal stuff that was going on. And it really did. I just didn't want to do anything. My wife would say I was always irritable, and I just lost any and all interest in the things that I love to do. You know what I mean? And it took me to that point where, like, I am so tired of just being sad for no good reason. There wasn't a reason. Mark, I tell you this, and anyone that knows me is going to fully understand what I say. I am the luckiest man in the world with my marriage. I'll put that marriage up against anyone. I'm lucky to have that woman as she's my cornerstone, man. She took care of everything when I was in the hospital. I was in a bubble, fighting for my life, but she was on the outside in the real world dealing with everyday life, taking care of our young son at the time and everything. So I'm lucky to have that backing. Not everyone does. But I really think, my choice to go and talk and get medicated for it, that it was definitely a lifesaver. I couldn't continue on the way I was. It was horrible.
Yeah, I think that's something we all end up facing at some point is the being tired of living comfortably uncomfortable.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Tired of just, this is the way I live, this is my life,
Yeah.
and I think for me, like I got so used to that just became my norm. That was my ground zero. Um, and like you, I'm medicated and I never wanted to do it. But
Yeah.
like you, it's a lifesaver. I mean, granted, it is not a solution, but it is a tool that we can use, along with the podcast and talking and going to therapy and, doing ART, doing, neuropathy therapy, doing the things that we can do to rebuild our psyche. I
Yeah.
think a lot of times what happens is the ability to think logically goes away with depression.
Oh
You know,
yeah. Oh yeah.
we run on emotion.
You're
You know,
so caught up in your own head.
yeah.
You don't even see it.
You know, one of the biggest things for me was 4409. You know that because you're from Pittsburgh, when the three officers got killed
Oh yeah.
up in Stanton Heights. Well, what people don't know is there's a fourth death related to that. Shortly after that, another officer killed herself.
Hmm.
And I believe, granted, once again, I am no scientist, I'm no genius, but I believe it's because they were, one of those persons was a close friend of hers, and it took a toll. But nobody knows that, and I'm probably going to catch some shit for saying that, but that's a fact. PTSD just doesn't affect the person with PTSD; it affects the people around them as well.
Oh yeah.
You know, how did your mood swings and your depression affect your family? If you don't mind talking about that.
No, not at all. You know, so we're such a small family. We're super close, and it just wasn't me. That Bart that my wife and son were getting wasn't me. Uh, and it wasn't fair to them. And at the time, in my real depths of my depression, I didn't even see it and I didn't care because I was so caught up in my own self-absorbed depression that even if I was hurting them, yeah, I didn't want to intentionally hurt them, mentally, but it I I was so caught up in my own shit, I didn't even care about it. You get almost comfortable in the depression, if that makes any sense. You know what
Oh
I
yeah,
mean?
100%, 100%. It's
And
warm and fuzzy, and it's what you know.
that's all I knew. And like I said, that clarity, that mental clarity, it was affecting my work. It was affecting decisions I was making. I was frivolously buying stuff that I didn't need, spending money, just like I was going to fill some sort of void.
Oh yeah.
Um, and so you understand, you get it. And
Man, I would change my car every time I had a meltdown. I'd buy a new car. Literally, if you call my guy down at the Toyota dealership in Mars, he'll be like, "Yeah, this fool bought a new car every year." And I didn't care what it cost. Like every time I would spend like outrageous amounts of money because when I would have a manic break, I would need to fill that with something that I could tangibly put my hands on and say,
Yeah.
"Okay, I'm okay. I got this. I'm still good."
And guess what? Not good.
I used to drive into the dealership drunk and buy a car drunk
Wow.
and like an idiot. Like so I digress again into my life because that's just what I do.
That's
Um,
all good.
a lot of people think that, addiction and mental health aren't directly causational. And what I've found to be for me is that my drinking was a result of poor mental health. Granted, it was also, my weakness and my liking to drink and have a party, but at the base level, it was undiagnosed mental health that
Mhm.
was leading me to drink the way I drank because I needed to shut off my brain. And this is the only way I learned. Um, Maybe go into that a little bit. What's your opinion when it comes to addiction and mental health and the causational relationship?
Well, I think definitely it goes hand in hand, especially, as people move on in that depression and then whether they're abusing drugs or drinking, like you said, with people in suicide, I think that has a little bit of cause of it because they're not in that mental clarity if you're drunk or if you're high on something. Uh, but it goes hand in hand for sure. And like I said, my teen years, man, we all partied, we all experimented and did that fun stuff. But I've been very lucky. I don't have an addictive personality. I mean, I loved food, that was my crutch, but I really didn't, and I'm very lucky in that manner. Um, there's definitely something to it. I think if you're depressed and then, like you said, trying to numb that pain or just not feel anything at all, uh, I see why people do it. I see this, just pop that other pill, I'll feel good, and then I can forget about it. Then I'll wake up in the morning, pop another one. That's where it just keeps on going down and down and down. So, I mean, again, Mark, I'm lucky not to have had that. I don't
Yes,
even drink. I
you
don't even drink
are.
alcohol. So,
Yes, you are. And
yeah.
on that same topic, another thing I think that is not often realized is that alcoholism and poor mental health, take them separately, they have very similar effects on your
Hmm.
day-to-day life. If you're just mental health or if you're just addiction, a lot of the same behaviors manifest, right? Isolation, not responding to friends, not wanting to do the things you want to do, being afraid to do things you like because you just don't feel like it anymore. You know, um, in your experience, what do you think of that idea? Do you agree with that, or you think there's a little bit different aspect on it?
I agree with it because, like you said, I can't. When I was in the depths of my depression, pardon me, I wouldn't even leave the house.
Hmm.
So I could have easily just went, okay, here's that bottle. I could have, and I really do think if you're depressed, you're not going to have any other way out. Some people don't have that other way out and don't want to go get the help, and then just start chugging or taking pills. Um, and it's really hard because I don't know that side of it. I don't know the addiction side of it to really understand it.
Yeah.
So I can speak from just the depression side of it. That's really all I can comment on really with
Yeah.
it.
As an outsider, if you see someone that you think is suffering from depression or an
Hmm.
addiction, let's just focus on depression because that's your niche, right?
Yeah.
Um, so if you think somebody has depression, what can we do as an outsider, as a friend, family member, loved one, coworker? What can we do to help? Because we know they're not going to ask for our help.
Yeah. The main thing that I've noticed is, even like you said, if those people usually don't reach out at all, um, I I will approach someone because you can tell if someone is, you see them in their normal states, and then if they're a real talkative person, and then they seem more reserved for like a week at a time, or just the opposite, real reserved, and then they're over talkative. Something's going on. I'm pretty in tune with psych stuff because that when I was still working EMS, I loved psych patients. A lot of people don't like that, but I could relate to it because I understand, that isolation feeling of like, wow, I'm caught up in my own shit. Well,
What's going on here?
you went somewhere, Mark.
Technical difficulty, folks. Technical difficulty. We just lost the camera somehow. All right, stand by. Give me two
Yeah,
seconds.
man.
It's always something with Riverside, brother. He's like, what? Let's see. Let's go here. See. I'll cut this out. Don't worry.
No, you're good.
Make sure this is fucking working now.
Damn Riverside.
Fucking Rivers. There we go. Fucking Riverside,
The thing is, it's the best one out there, I think.
man. I mean, it is for what we're doing. You know what I mean? To be able to, like, a one-stop shop. The only thing that really sucks is their clip making. Their auto-generated clips slow. All right, let's get this out of here. Okay, where were we? What were we talking about?
Basically, like if you notice someone that's
Gotcha.
struggling, and how you can
All
sort
right,
of
I'm
reach
tracking.
out to them and everything.
Yeah, so you see somebody suffering, and you mentioned, you see character changes, right? Like,
Hmm.
if you know somebody really well, like the people around me, I distance from them when I was in the heart of my addiction. Like I canceled plans because I didn't want to be around them, all those things. But I kept them at a distance intentionally.
Right.
Like you said, people aren't going to just come out and go, "Hey, I want to kill myself." They're going to go through all these phases of denial and, depression and all the things that come along with it. So say you see somebody that you've known a really long time,
hmm
and what would be the signs that you would look for, other than like the drastic character change, like going from quiet to loud and loud to quiet? What are the things do you think we could look at, when we're looking at our friends and doing our, as friends, we do a checkup, right? Like we call,
Yeah.
"Hey, how you
Oh
doing?"
yeah. The
You know,
check-ins. The check-ins.
what other things can we do? What other things can we look for that might be indications that someone is struggling with mental health and they need our help?
You hit it on the head. There is the withdrawal. That's a biggie. I've always, if I've noticed, a family member or a friend that's been struggling, and I'll say one of my best friend, my best friend, uh, drinks, and I always tell him, I'm like, dude, like, he's made comments to me about, he's like, hopefully I make it to 50. I'm like, you gotta make it to 50 because I'm gonna be right there with you. So you just have to be on top of them, like call them out, that sort of that tough love sort of thing. It might make them withdraw a little bit more at the time, but at some point you're going to catch them and you're going to keep on telling them we're going to do something, or you just, I don't have a problem with 302 and a buddy of mine. I wouldn't have a problem if that means that they could live and not kill themselves.
Yeah, real quick, if
Uh,
you want to explain the 302 for people that don't know what it is.
so it's a commitment here, and I think is it just in Pennsylvania? I'm
I think
pretty
it's just
sure.
in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. So in Pennsylvania, it's mandatory. You stay in a health ward, and they observe you for I think 72 hours or
Yeah,
something along those
I
lines.
think it's mandatory 72, and then they can reevaluate and keep you longer if they deem it necessary, or they cut
Yeah.
you loose after like 72.
And there's no problem with that. We're tired of seeing our friends kill themselves.
Yeah.
And but that I mean that taking it to that extreme, sure. I mean, if you care about your friends, do it. There's no problem with it, and it's always speak up. Don't be afraid to. And I've always said this. I like to stay out of people's business. I mind my business, but on the flip side of that, it's my responsibility as a friend, and I think just as a genuine human being to be like, if I see someone struggling, I'll do whatever I can to make sure that they at least have the resources, or take them somewhere if they need to go there. There's nothing wrong with doing that.
Were you able to do that when you were in the heart of your depression? Were you able to see the things that other people were going through? Because I know when I was in my alcoholism, I couldn't see shit except my way to the cooler. Like that. I was so self-absorbed in my own bullshit, and not even intentionally, but
Yeah.
just like my life was geared around, excuse me, getting a beer, getting a drink in me, and shutting off the voices. So do you think it's possible when someone's in the heart of addiction or in the heart of their mental health struggle to even see what's going on with other people?
I think there is, because I could still see it. You know, I could see it with other people around me, even in my clouded mind state that I was in. Uh, I did a lot of work, a lot of self work, because I leaned back on, and it might sound cliche or a little bit weird, but music for me is it's a lifesaver, and meditation. I started reading a lot of self help books, a lot of stuff on meditation and Buddhism, and it definitely has a place. Whether you come from a religious background or whatever, you don't have to. But it's mindfulness. Mindfulness definitely is a key to it. You have to really, and I think where that came from for me was being in the hospital. I learned a lot about my own self being locked in a hospital for 2 months. You know, you really figure out your own self in that way, and then it's a continued thing. I'm always gonna struggle with depression. I'm always been a depressed person, I guess, and I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm aware of it, and I know how to. I know how to
You got the coping skills now.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
coping skills and the resources, and now that's in front of me. But like you said, if people don't have that, people just aren't going to reach out. A lot of people don't reach out at all.
Well,
And
well, staying on that topic, when you were in the heart of your mental health struggle, did you ever look at somebody and like mirror that? Like, hey, I'm doing the same shit.
I had a few moments of clarity. Sure.
I mean,
And
that's huge self-awareness to see that and go, hey, maybe that's me too.
and I yeah, those moments of clarity did happen because I was always trying to. I hit it so well, dude. I hit it so well, and because I've always Bart's that happy guy. He's always cool, calm, and collected, man. Inside, I wasn't, not at all, but I hit it, and I said before, I would always give really good advice, but I would never follow my own advice. And that's what I think probably got to me so bad. I'm like, why am I giving these people like these? I fully understand what they're going through and trying to like help them in their own, but I wasn't helping myself, man. And I had to invest in myself again. I had to tell myself, dude, enough is enough. Go get the fucking help you need. Your wife, your son, yourself, you fucking deserve it.
It's a
You
life or
know,
death fight, man. It's a
it
life or death
is.
fight, and I think that's something that's forgotten. I
It
think
is.
we mentioned how law enforcement, paramedics, EMS, veterans, they're all Type A, all Type A. We handle our shit, rub some dirt on it, you'll be fine. Um, and I think that's a stigma we're both trying to break. I think that's
Oh yeah.
ultimately what we're trying to do here.
We're
We've talked.
fixers, man.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like going from law enforcement. Like, here's the thing, man. Like law enforcement, we see a lot of bad shit, right? But we see some good shit. You
Sure.
guys, as paramedics, all you see is bad. Like
We see good
every
though.
call
We
you go
saw
to
good.
is somebody is in need medically.
It
Like
is.
that's a totally different world. Like I couldn't understand that. I've had some calls in my career that like should have just floored me and ended me. Just like every cop does. But we push it down. We struggle through it. Like that's every call for you.
Yeah.
The risk is so much higher that you're going to see something really, really bad.
And we did for sure. And I think, as a whole, and I'm gonna ruffle some feathers probably, but
Please do.
you
The
agree
new
with
name
it.
of this show is Ruffle My Feathers.
But it's not a bad thing, but it's my, now that I'm outside of EMS, it's my observation, and then like really reflecting on it, and actually on our podcast speaking to other paramedics uh from a day-to-day call-to-call thing. Police, you guys always in danger. You go on a traffic stop, and easily you could get shot out of the car. So you guys go into super serious situations, life or death situations every day. Firefighters, same thing, but you go on a good house fire that goes into multi alarms. You guys they're 100% balls to the wall. They're getting the work done. When on a day-to-day call-to-call EMS, that tone drops, you go into a bad call. Whether you're still going to someone's emergency, maybe not your emergency, but their emergency. Every single call, you're going to help someone directly and taking them probably to the hospital. You might be getting a refusal out of it. But then you have the bad calls, and those calls stack up, and they stack up, and they stack up, and it's call to call to call. Then you get into dispatch. Pick up the phone, ring, ring, ring. Let's get that sent out. Ring, 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 ring. So you can't say you have someone blow their head off. You hang up that call. As soon as that call, there's another call waiting for you to pick up. You don't even have a minute to process what you just did.
How do you do the dispatching thing? Like, I always used to joke around. You had Magic Mike on the mic for a long time in the city, and the guy was funny, but he's kind of an idiot. But like, on the outside, we don't understand as law enforcement, as first responders, we don't sit behind that desk and take that phone call. Like, what
Yeah.
is that job like?
It's so for me it was a huge challenge first getting into dispatch because I worked on the trucks for so long. So I am used to being there, seeing it, smelling it, taking care of it. And on the other side, you answer the phone and I'm not taking care of it, but in another way. So that was hard to shut off the EMS side of my brain to actually go into dispatch. But it's very difficult. It, where I work, we have super highly trained professionals that we work as a team. It's a fine oil machine, and we do a very, very hard job. So you have like call taking, and then you have dispatch. They're two separate things. Uh, it's tough, man. I definitely enjoy dispatching over call taking. Because call taking, you're talking to the general public, call after call after call after call after call. And it gets busy. It gets very, very busy there. It's a challenge though. I think, if people ever want to get into dispatch, I think it behooves them not to be a first responder prior to going into it. A lot of people that do get into dispatching that do very well are like from the service industry, because you're talking to people constantly, and it's service. You're serving the public in that manner. They're calling in expecting a resolution to their problem that they have going on, and we take that call, get that pertinent information, then we send it to dispatch, and then we get the right units going to it. But it's tough. It's a tough job. I'm coming up on 6 years dispatching here. I think on the 15th is my 6-year anniversary. Is it the 15th today, or is that tomorrow? I don't even know what day it is.
14th, my friend.
So tomorrow. There you go.
I had to look at my watch. It's my girlfriend's birthday. I had to look at my watch. What an idiot I am.
Better.
Oh my God, I'm in so much trouble. So being law enforcement, like, cops always have a problem with dispatchers. Like, we just have a problem with them because, we always want certain information and they always give us what we don't want. Like, for example, I always bring up 4409. After that call came out, because there's weapons involved now, every time, like right after that, every time you got a domestic call, they're like, no weapons available. I'm like, bullshit. There's a shovel, there's a lawnmower, there's a pot, there's forks, there's knives. Like, if someone's coming out, if you see someone who wants to become a dispatcher, what would you tell them? What kind of advice would you give them on the dispatching side? Because you have experience on a truck, and you have experience behind the phone, and you have an experience behind the microphone. Like, what would be some good advice for someone? Anything you would want to tell somebody who wants to get into being a dispatcher?
Self-education is a biggie. Go do some ride-alongs, especially if they have no inkling of like they haven't been on the other side of the microphone. The thing with the like weapons questions, the programs that we use in dispatch, it's built out by huge departments and first responders themselves. So the questions that we do have to ask, it's all protocol. Like you said, is there weapons involved? Is there any weapons access? As a police officer, there's kitchen knives, but was that involved in the situation? Was there a knife pulled? Was there a knife in hand? So I would assume on the police side of things, you guys are already going in expecting to maybe have a weapon no matter what. And we all know domestic calls are the most dangerous calls you can go on.
Yeah, I mean, you're taught as law enforcement that there's always a weapon in play when you go to a call. You've got a handgun, you've got a taser, you've got pepper spray, you've probably got a knife somewhere, if not 3. There's always a weapon involved. I guess the thing I'm getting at more is like, and this may not be a question that can be answered. As a cop, you're looking for specific information, and you guys have a matrix that you use, right? You have these questions you ask. Maybe a little bit of maybe like advice or purpose on how to handle the information and how to put that information out so that the person on the other end of that microphone gets a clear picture, or at least the clearest picture they can get with the limited information you have. Because I think a lot of times there's not enough information a lot of times, and that's not your fault. That's not the dispatcher's fault. It's whoever they're talking to is frantic, losing their minds, and they can only get out a couple things.
Right.
But, more to the point of like how to handle the information and how to put that information out so it can be clear and concise and to the point.
So a lot of that, it comes with experience. It comes with, so like, that those canned questions that we have to ask, and then coming from the call taking bank, going over into dispatch, what we see on our screen is what you see on your MDT. So if we don't have any more information, we don't have any more information.
Yeah.
So I think where that happens though is what, like I said, me getting my CTO is you have these new people coming in. You have these trainers that have experience. It starts with training. It starts at the very base. As soon as you come onto the floor and you start taking calls, you have to instill in the new generation of dispatchers. You have to tell them, be like, listen, we have officers, we have EMTs, we have firefighters. Their lives are at jeopardy if we don't get them as much detailed information as we can. So it definitely, like, I can't quite answer, how do we change that, but I can say it starts at the very bottom of your training and what your trainer is doing for you and that experience that you can pass over. We can't gatekeep in these type of jobs. You have to pass along the knowledge that you have from your experience of being on the radio or on the street, and that has to be given to these new people if you want the profession to do well and if you want to keep your responders safe. That's my main priority, because anytime, and for me, obviously my realm is EMS. That's what I'm most comfortable on. That's the desk that I like to be on, is an EMS desk. When I get onto the police side, yeah, I am hyper focused on it, because I know that can pop off like nothing. It pops off.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to make sure that my officers, so if I get that information and if you're calling back in over the radio and be like, can you do a callback? Can we see where this person is? Do we have a better description of the perpetrator or whatever, or a better, the license plate didn't ran. We don't have a good plate. Can we get a better description on the car? So I do whatever I can, even though, you know how it goes. You guys get tight with us sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
We give it right back.
Yeah, you
have to.
You do.
But
And
we do know that you guys are at a heightened state, and that we need to make sure that you're getting the correct information. And as a dispatcher, I pride myself at making sure that I do to the best of my ability and the best of my training. That's what I try to do.
Well, whoever's on the radio needs to appreciate what you do. I think you said something really, really important there, and that's that, with all these agencies, law enforcement, EMS, medical, it can pop off in a heartbeat.
Oh yeah.
And the purpose, in my mind, of a dispatcher is to collect, document, and put out the information in a way that's easily understandable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if the purpose of someone in EMS dispatch is anything other than to help others and protect the people they're dealing with, then they should not be doing it. I think you have to have that goal purpose of service.
You do. You absolutely have to.
Cool.
It's a service. Yours is serve and protect as a police officer. Ours is to serve our officers, serve our responders, to make sure they go home safely after every shift.
Well, once again, I appreciate what you do, brother.
Nah, absolutely, man. That I wouldn't still be doing it if I didn't believe in that. You know what I mean? Yeah.
We've talked about a lot of negative. Tell me how your life has changed since you've taken your mental health in taken that fight.
Dude, one was my physical health. I'm down to about 110 pounds. So my wife's the same. She's right at 100 pounds, and just seeing that change in ourselves. We look back on these pictures that we have of ourselves, like at Disney on family vacations or something. I'm like, those are different people, so everything, the weight loss has changed. It has helped my mental health, the exercise, everything, man. Everything has changed because I took that step to better my physical health, better my mental health, reaching out for the help and getting medicated, and doing these podcasts is like a therapy session all in itself, man. It's fantastic. And if we can reach out, you and I, on our shows, to help one person, that's all it takes. It was worth our time and our frustrations with Riverside. It's well worth it, because it starts somewhere, and we have to put our best foot forward and show people that, like you said, recovery happens. mental health recovery happens, you just have to start it. You have to reach out, and you have to ask for help. But other than that, man, my work life is fantastic now. I'm really focused on that. We're focused on the podcast. We're just focusing on, trying to make people's lives a little bit easier, and I think that's really what my wife and I's focus has been. We've really been putting our heart and souls into what we're doing and trying to spread that word to everyone. So mentally, man, uh, I feel like that old Bart is like, we go through these progressions in life, and this, and you look back, and I'm like, man, was that really me? Or man, was that really me? And I look at myself now, and I'm like, this is the true Bart. This is what I've always meant to be, and it's what I'm supposed to be. Whatever higher power that it is, they gave me that gift to, I think, do what we're doing now. And that's what we're going to continue to do, is just fight that stigma for people, and to try to make everyone, if they don't have to hurt, we're going to try to make them not hurt.
Well, it's amazing what you've done. I love what you're doing with the podcast. I mean, I've always thought you're a solid dude. I'm grateful for you, and I'm grateful for what you're doing. Is there anything you would like to leave with to tell our folks that are watching and listening?
Guys, if you're struggling, that those days of suck it up, buttercup, or I'm strong enough, I can handle this, they're over, man. Like, if you're struggling, it doesn't have to be reaching out to us. Do your own self education. Go online, look up the resources. If you ever have a question, reach out to Mark or myself. We can definitely get you those resources. But please reach out. We don't want to see any more of our friends putting guns in their mouths, killing themselves, taking pills. It's not worth it. We're meant to be here. We want to make the world a better place than when we came in, and that's what we're trying to do, man. So let's do it. Let's kill that stigma.
Hell yeah. My brother, Bart Heaney, the Weight We Carry podcast. Plug that real quick. Tell people where they can watch, listen.
Yeah, so if you want to be on the show, hit up TWWC podcast at proton.me. Check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, all the big platforms. But subscribe on YouTube. We need those subscriptions.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, listen, guys, I'm going to be putting a link to Bart's podcast on my website. That'll be happening in the next couple of days, where if you go to steelcityroundtablepodcast.com, you can click on his link, and hopefully we'll get it working. It'll take you right to his podcast, so you can check his stuff out. So yeah, well, I appreciate your time, brother. I know you're busy. You got the family to deal with. Thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk about what needs to be talked about. And as always, folks, we're not alone in this world. We only choose to be alone. So pick up that fight, reach out to a friend, family member, coworker, and do something to make your life better. Because I'll tell you what, I'm never going back to where I was, because life is amazing once you have good mental health and you're taking care of yourself. So I'll see you next time. Bart, thank you very much, brother.
Honored, brother. Thank you.